Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on introducing the Canadian Parks, Recreation and Sport Infrastructure Database. My name is Diane English. I'm a Senior Project Manager with Parks and Recreation. I was going to say that, knew it was going to say it, Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. And we're pleased today to present this in collaboration with Active Exchange. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get going. The webinar is scheduled to last an hour. You might have noticed that it said 2 hours in your most recent update. I just wanted to make sure if we went a little bit over time that we wouldn't get cut off and that there would be time for questions at the end, but we plan to be wrapping up in 1 hour. Please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself to us and to your fellow attendees today. We've got a full house from across Canada. We will be using the Q&A box, which is also on your on the menu bar for you to take your questions throughout, and we have time to answer those questions at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to the webinar following the webinar recording following today's presentation. We will not be sending out the slides, and I think it'll be self-explanatory why we do that during the presentation. The recording will be much more useful to you. There are also a lot of how-to videos available for you to help get you started with the database. My apologies, I am in the wrong spot on my presentation. There we go. I like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we are meeting virtually, I encourage us all to just take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands and the things we love about the places we each call home. The main office for CPRA is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Mohawk First Nations. We acknowledge the historical oppression of these lands, cultures, and of the original peoples in what we now know as Canada. And we aim to contribute to the healing and decolonizing journey we all share today. And just before we begin, also, I would like to just take a minute to say that we know many of our colleagues in Alberta have been affected by the devastating wildfires, and we hope that everyone is safe and that we continue to keep you in our thoughts. So as I mentioned today, we have a full agenda. We'll do a brief overview of CPRA and Active Exchange. We'll give you some project background, and then we're just going to dive right into this amazing database, which is really going to change the game for sport, recreation, and parks infrastructure in our country. And as I mentioned, at the end, there's time for questions. So please put your questions in the box at any time. And yes, David, the webinar will be recorded, and we're going to make it available to you in an email, but it will also be available in the bench, and I'll talk more about that later. So with that, I would like to hand the microphone and the slide deck over to Martin Sampson, who is the CEO of Canadian Parks and Recreation Association.
Thank you, Diane. Hello, everyone. I want to start with a big thank you. I want to thank you to everyone who supported this project, including our friends at Parks Canada, who have made a significant contribution to getting us up and off the ground. But I also want to thank our colleagues at ActiveX, Chris, Jeff, and the whole team over there. And of course, I have to acknowledge the enormous contribution made by Diane, who is CPRA's lead on this. Thank you very much, Diane. Simply put, it wouldn't be happening without you and your effort. And I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us today. We got a lot of people on this call, and we have lots of people who are registering to use the database, and that is extremely encouraging. As I'll explain in a moment, it's encouraging because it really bodes well for the future. This is a cornerstone tool in our toolbox that we'll be using for some time to come. And I'm really excited about today and about what we're going to be able to do with this. So I'm going to tell you a teeny bit about CPRA and then just a little bit about how this project fits in. I do encourage you to continue using the chat function. We definitely want to hear from you. We want to continue this journey with you. So let me tell you a little bit about CPRA. CPRA's mission is to fully realize the role that parks and recreation can play in building healthy and vibrant communities. We have three focus areas. First, we're a voice on behalf of our sector and our membership, and our members are the 13 provincial and territorial parks and recreation associations and their members, which equate to about 90% of Canadian municipalities. So really, we're a voice on behalf of the sector to the federal government and to all the rest of civil society. Our second focus area is that we convene community. This is a good example of it. We like to bring the community together. And then the third is that we want to provide resources to that community. We'll talk in a moment about some of the things that we're doing, but this is a good example. The infrastructure database is one of the resources that we want to bring to the community that are useful to people like those of you on this call, the professionals, the practitioners, the planners, the policymakers, the people who are really thinking about these important issues. At the very center of our work are a couple of projects, and I would say none are as important as the infrastructure database. So when I say that we are a voice to the federal government largely on behalf of the sector, you should know that as we aim for the fall economic statement and as we aim for the budget in next spring, we are going to be putting forward a very substantial ask on infrastructure. I don't need to tell the people on this call, you know all too well, you live it, but we have a challenge with infrastructure in this country. Much of it is aging, and we are seeking to rectify that with a constructive, thoughtful, and rather large ask of the federal government in the upcoming budget cycle. This tool is going to be integral to carrying that narrative forward. And the reason that I say it here is just so that you're aware of it, but also because we're going to be dependent on our community right across the country to be making sure that the data is as up to date as possible and that this tool is being used. So again, I mentioned that we're on this journey together. We really do invite your feedback. We want you to be involved, and we need help making sure that the data is as current as possible, which will be an ongoing challenge that I think we can address collectively. So a couple of other things, at CPRA, in terms of the resources we bring to the community, it could be program resources. Like recently, we ran a program called Reaching Each and Every One. The goal of that program was to remove barriers that underserved groups faced while trying to access recreational sport. But we also work on things like the Framework for Recreation, which is the de facto policy document at the federal and provincial level for our sector. And then the last bullet on the slide, I'll just linger on a moment because it goes so hand in glove with the infrastructure database. And that's something that we call the social, health, economic, and environmental value of physical recreation, sport, or rather recreation, sport, and physical activity. We are in the process right now of doing some math to calculate the rather significant contribution that our sector makes to the Canadian economy, to mitigating the impacts of climate change, to building healthy and vibrant communities, and overall allowing policymakers to make informed decisions when they're making investments that will hopefully allow our sector to do the very important work that it does, which I think includes the obvious, right? We are at the center of communities. When you talk about recreation, really you're talking about all the things that people do to recharge and reset so they can contribute to this country. And when we talk about parks, we're talking about connection to mental and physical well-being and connection to nature and making sure that there's lots of community green space. So we're trying to measure all that. We have a number of tools in our toolbox. It's going to be an exciting year ahead for us, and we hope to be able to deliver some really important outcomes on behalf of the sector so that your work is made a little bit easier. So I'm going to end where I started, which is a big thank you to all of you for joining. And as I said, please get involved in the discussion, and I'll hand it back over to Diane and the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. And it's my pleasure now to be able to introduce our colleagues from Active Exchange, Chris Patterson and Jeff Foster, who are in Alberta and are heading up the work here in Canada, not only in Canada, but in North America. And they're going to walk us through the database. So I'm going to stop sharing, and oh, look, it was even more seamless. Excellent. Over to you guys.
Thanks, Diane. A quick introduction for myself. My name is Jeff Foster. As Diane said, I am an account manager, client success here with Active Exchange. I'm based out of Calgary, Alberta. So as I'm sure with a lot of you, my thoughts are with those affected by the fires going on in our province here. I'd also like to spend a quick moment to say thank you to Diane and Martin and the rest of the CPRA team. It's been a pleasure to get this project off the ground, and we're super excited to finally launch this project and introduce it to all of you and get everyone into our database. So without further ado, I would like to take a couple of moments just to talk about who Active Exchange is. So we are a multi-award-winning data science and technology organization that is collaborating with organizations in the parks, recreation, and sports sectors to make data simple to use and support strategic decision-making. Our data intelligence as a service platform provides our partners with access to unique insights, trends, and benchmarks, and has been able to impact over 5 million sport and recreation members worldwide. But what do we do? What we do is we solve the sector's data problems, such as fragmented data, insufficient insights, offer misalignment, all of this by putting key intelligence at your fingertips. And by putting key intelligence at your fingertips, we're able to answer some pretty critical questions, such as, why is one person more likely to be active than another person? Which locations and facilities are more likely to attract demand than others? And what is the value of participation to enable these evidence-based decisions? Now, to provide data intelligence to the parks, sports, and recreation sectors, we partner with various types of organizations, most of which are on our call today, to build out our deep market intelligence capabilities. We work with sports organizations and governing bodies, sport and recreation center operators, municipal, provincial, and national government organizations, parks, recreation, and physical activity industry leaders, strategic planning consultants, and membership system providers. All of these organizations are combined to build out our deep market data pool and intelligence capabilities. Now that we know a little bit about who this new organization is on the block, Active Exchange, I'd like to spend some time talking a bit about our project itself. Launched in April, the Canadian Parks, Recreation, and Sport Infrastructure Database is the first national infrastructure database that's been designed specifically for parks, recreation, and sports organizations who have an interest within community sport and recreational infrastructure. We've built this platform for the Canadian market with a French translation that is currently in development and featuring an open and community-sourced sport, aquatic, fitness, and recreation sites. This central database and dashboard enhances the efficiency and effectiveness of using data to inform critical infrastructure planning. Now, to realize the complete potential of this database, all stakeholders, all of you on the call today, are encouraged to add, edit, manage, and access the relevant infrastructure information contained within the database. Now, in today's webinar, we don't want to do a full demo of our product. We want to ensure that you all go in and take a look and add, edit, and manage the site's facilities yourself. But we did want to highlight 4 important aspects of the Canadian Parks, Recreation, and Sport Infrastructure Database. And those being, firstly, our site and facility infrastructure data, the National Infrastructure Database dashboard, our demographic, equity, diversity, and healthcare indicators, and our movement data module. But before we jump into each of the areas that we want to highlight, each of those 4 areas, it's important for us to have a strong understanding of how data within the database is structured. At its broadest, the infrastructure database is based on infrastructure sites, these being parks, recreation centers, arenas, fields, etc. These sites are what each pin on the map that I'm sure most of you have seen is. Contained within each of these sites is, at a minimum, 1 facility. Facilities are amenities that provide some purpose for the parks, recreation, or sports sector or piece of infrastructure for the site. Facility examples include pools, skating rinks, gymnasiums, social halls, and much more. As shown by the pie chart on your screen right now, one site can contain either one or multiple facilities, depending on its purpose. For example, there may be a small park which only has one facility, that being the park itself, the green space, while a larger recreation center or large park may have multiple facilities contained within, and we'll show an example of that today. At its most detailed level are usages. A usage is the specific ways in which a facility is intended to be used. This facility may have only one intended use, such as a hot tub, or it may have multiple usages, such as an ice rink for hockey, ringette, leisure skating, and much more. And then the final piece of this puzzle are action plans. An action plan denotes an anticipated planned activity at the site, such as a site or facility refurbishment, new infrastructure development, or other project that impacts the infrastructure of the site. So now that we have a strong understanding of the data schema, let's take a look at some site examples in the database. And I've realized I don't think I shared my screen properly, so I now need to reshare properly here. Oh, no, that didn't work, my mistake. There we are. I believe this is now showing properly. Excuse me here. Okay. So once we've loaded into the mapping feature, we're loaded with this beautiful map of Canada. And the first thing that I want to highlight is our site information. Sorry, 1 second. I'm facing some slight technical difficulties here. Thank you. So the first thing that I want to look at is a specific site in Lethbridge. By zooming into the city of Lethbridge here, which has a few different pieces of site infrastructure contained, I want to look at the Cor Van Ray YMCA facility that is operated by the YMCA of Lethbridge. Now, clicking into this, we can see we have a few different tabs up here, the site, facilities, and action plans. Under the site tab, we have a large quantity of different site details that you can look at here, including location, site access, support services, and other services. We also have the facilities contained within the site itself. We have a list of facilities here, such as a swimming pool, multi-purpose rooms, climbing walls, etc. Within the swimming pool itself, and also within each of the other facilities, is where we have our usages. For this swimming pool, we have diving, learn to swim, and then leisure swimming. Now, all these different facilities here and all these different usages can be brought in, can be used for a variety of different pieces of infrastructure, no matter what your role is in the parks, recreation, or sports sector. Now, the second piece that I wanted to highlight is our National Infrastructure Database dashboard. What we're looking at now is this dashboard itself. At the top here, we have a variety of filters for you to customize to view exactly what type of infrastructure information you want to look at. Here I've set up the filters to be only arena/areas, to be only ice, natural ice, for the facility setting type to be indoor only, and for the facility usages to be only those that you would typically find on a traditional ice rink. So that being curling, which may be a little different than some, but we want to include it anyways, ice hockey, ice skating, figure skating, and ringette. Now, looking at the province and territory here, we have a breakdown of all of the arenas that are specific for this facility, these facility usages, indoor and only natural ice, across each of the provinces and territories in Canada. Now, as you begin to use and add and edit and manage sites in the database, this number will grow and change and adapt depending on what pieces of infrastructure you are adding to the database. If I wanted to go down further, deeper into an individual province, which I'm going to do for Saskatchewan, and then look at the census subdivision breakdown, which is a smaller area, think municipality-sized districts. We have a breakdown of all the different census subdivisions in Saskatchewan. I could also go down one level further and look only in Regina to see that there are only 7 sites that are currently tracked in the database that fit the parameters above. You could even go a little bit lower and look at the census tract, a smaller geographic breakdown, or the dissemination area, an even smaller geographic breakdown. I encourage you all to take a look at our dashboard and manipulate the filters to your purpose and what you can get information out of. The next piece that I wanted to look at is our demographic, equity, diversity, and healthcare indicators. So again, back on our main map here, I want to take a look at Winnipeg, which is a place that is near and dear to my heart as I have lots of family here in Winnipeg. What I want to first highlight is take a look at our census subdivision lines or census subdivision breakdown here. By turning on the lines and zooming in out a little bit out of Winnipeg, we can see what these census subdivisions are. So we have Winnipeg here. Beside it, we have Headlington, Cartier, Rosier, all these different census subdivisions nearby. To turn on one of our demographic, equity, diversity, and healthcare indicators, I'm going to look at the female population between 30 and 44 at the census subdivision level. What we can see here is because Winnipeg is a large metropolitan area, there is a higher portion of females between the age range there than there is in the surrounding CSDs. And if I zoom out a bit further, we can see that for each of the more metropolitan areas like Brandon, Manitoba, the darker color there indicates the higher population. If we wanted to see what the breakdown was within Winnipeg, I'm going to alter my lines to look at the dissemination area, which you can think of as neighborhood blocks, and turn on the exact same filter just for the city of Winnipeg here. Taking this one dissemination area over here, what I can do is I can click on it to take a look at the general population, populations by age and gender, and our other equity, diversity, and inclusion indicators and health and well-being indicators. The only other community profile layer that I will showcase is one from our equity, diversity, and inclusion indicators, which is our immigrant population. This one here highlights the level of immigrant population throughout the city of Winnipeg. And we could also take a look at other areas of the country, other cities, other census subdivisions. But for today's purposes, I will leave us at that. And I encourage you all to go and take a look at each of these indicators to see what is of use to your organization. Now, the last aspect that we want to highlight in our short showcase today is our movement data module. And what I've done here is I have zoomed in to a city that I used to call home, which is Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Saskatoon has this beautiful park right along the river here called Victoria Park that is right along the South Saskatchewan River. That is very popular in the spring and summertime for picnics, for lawn games, to bring families to enjoy time by the river. Now, our movement data module tracks movement and activity within a series of quad keys, which are 100 meter by 100 meter grids across the country. Zooming into this one park here, what we can do is take a look at what the relevant activity and movement that has been tracked within this area for a given month, time of day, and whether weekday or weekend. I'm going to look at July 2022, which would be about the peak busyness of this area here on a weekend. And I would like to see how the movement progresses over time here. So looking at the time, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10. As I progress along the day, we can see these squares, quad keys, are colored in red. The deeper the color red signifies the higher quantity of activity that has been tracked in that quad key. As I continue to progress, we can see 1 o'clock. It gets much more busy in certain quad keys, particularly right there. and we can continue on throughout the rest of the day. Now, I would like to reshare my slide deck to continue our presentation. And again, I think I may have missed that, done a bit of a technical difficulty there. So here we go. Oh, I am on the wrong slide. My mistake here. Thank you all for your patience here. Okay. Now, while we have all seen the Movement Pro module, let me back up here one second. For all those on the Canadian Parks, Recreation and Sport Infrastructure Database, you have access to the Movement Data module for free as a part of your account. In addition to that, we have what is called the Movement Pro module with additional features, including NID site monitoring, that allows you to monitor movement for any site within the National Infrastructure Database. Quad key collection, which allows you to collect all of those quad keys that are fully customizable to monitor unique and large geographical areas. And activity index export, which allows you to export the average activity index into a CSV format for your personal analysis. And a movement monitoring dashboard that allows you to monitor movement over time and have these seamlessly visualized and compared with one another. I'd now like to pass it off to my colleague, Chris Patterson, our general manager, to discuss more about our Movement Pro and the expression of interest for this Movement Pro initiative.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, everybody, for attending our chat today. And as well, I'll reiterate Jeff's thanks to Martin and Diane and the rest of the CPRA crew as well. Just before we get into this, I'll touch on a few questions here that have come up in the Q&A. First off, just for clarity, as I believe most of you already know, having accounts within the database already, access to the database to use for site, facility, and usage, data ingestion, and effectively everything Jeff just took us through there is completely free access for any Canadian organization in the sector or any organization that has interest in the sector. There are links to sign up for your free account. I believe it was in the invite for this webinar, as well as in other forums across the CPRA and the bench, as well as through Active Exchange's website as well. Speaking more towards the database itself, any organization can enter information and edit information around sites, facilities, and usages. The database itself is meant to be an open sourced collaborative space where there's integration and collaboration going on amongst not just municipalities, but also the nonprofit sector and other user groups, sports groups, etc. A question from Maureen here around outdoor playgrounds. Are they included in the database? A great example. Yes, they are. And we would advise or recommend that the playgrounds themselves, again, typically are located in a green space or an open park. So the playground would be considered a facility within that site. And then there's been a wealth of questions around movement and the movement data itself. So I'll just touch briefly on that. The movement data that we source is a privacy forward data set that leverages mobile device GPS signal and pings through, Jeff may have to help me out here, but thousands, if not tens of thousands of mobile apps, more than I think it's more than something like 700 million GPS pings worldwide on a daily basis, and a data set well in the billions or trillions as far as individual pings. That data is broken down by month, by year, by month, and by day type. So weekdays versus weekends. It's not as discrete to do the Monday to Mondays separately, Tuesday, etc. So another question in here was just around access, around differentiation between activity for physical activity or just car traffic and the like. The data, again, because it is fully anonymized, it doesn't differentiate between, what app it's coming from or anything like that. But to give you some examples of the types of apps that provide data into this service, Strava is probably the biggest one that we're, that fits within our sector there. So gives you an idea of the sense of this data set and what it's available. We use this data not just in Canada, we're also leveraging it in Australia and New Zealand, as well as in the UK currently. And we're looking to expand that into the US as well. So with that in mind, I'd like to bring us to this point here, this slide, and talk about this opportunity for early adopters through this initiative with the CPRA and through the Canadian Parks Recreation and Sport Infrastructure Database community to gain first access to Movement Pro and leverage Active Exchange's value-added Pro Analytics service and data science team. A portion of this initiative, a portion of the proceeds of this initiative will fund further development, not only in the pro movement space and data intelligence in that area, but it will also help fund further development and enhancement of the Canadian Parks and Recreation, the Canadian Parks, Recreation and Sport Infrastructure Database. It's a mouthful. Further including the free access enhancements or the free access sector of our database. What we felt best to explain this initiative a little bit further for you is around a case study, around an example study of a new spray deck added to a park in Sherwood Park, Alberta. Happens to actually be what I consider my hometown last summer, although I am based in Calgary as well now for the last number of years. So using this example, just highlighting the impact that infrastructure investment can have on the local community. Again, because this is a very recent project, and because our data set with Movement is continuing to evolve over time, it's updated monthly within the platform. This provides an opportunity for us to look at an illustrative level as to the type of analysis that can be considered, as well as the type of use case that each of your organizations, should you choose to pursue this service, can leverage it for your own purposes. So just moving on to a little bit of a highlight of this project and its impacts. The illustrative example shown here uses a comparable, although larger, community park a few blocks away, which is Florian Park. You can see that in the upper right of the upper left image. As a comparative, very similar single playground exists, and then in the case of McPherson Park, the spray deck was added in the summer of 2022. So we focused in on a comparative between within August of last year and weekend days, as you would typically expect a spray deck or a splash park to be at its highest use. And what you can see here resultantly from Movement is in the first graph, the upper graph there, an increase of that purple line over the course of the summer months, which is McPherson Park, to actually a decrease in activity across Florian Park over that same time frame. Perhaps that spike in August, September last year is reflective of increased usage or increased mobile device density at that location. The other observation we made here is that there's a higher average activity level throughout the midday hours at McPherson Park compared to Florian, noting that there's a considerable spike at around 9 a.m. So that would be the 9 to 10 a.m. hour. which is perhaps local road effects, although because this is weekend data only, you wouldn't expect a heavy amount of commuter traffic or anything like that. It's a small community road, but this could indicate arrival time on site, noticing that in the lower image there, the movement data overlaps the parking stalls and that off-road parking lot that's available for users. And then lastly, I'll just highlight leveraging the community profile layers. We're able to visually, at least at this time, compare the demographics between these two sites, and noticing that what's shown on the screen there in the center image is a significant difference in deprivation index. As well, we saw differences in income level, immigrant and Indigenous populations as well between those two park locations, despite being very, very closely located together. With a broader mosaic of infrastructure projects like these and their characteristics, what we aim to do is build out trending mosaic demographics and cause and effect analysis to demonstrate community impacts and return on investment metrics for these infrastructure projects. And I'll just highlight a little bit more of what you are expressing interest to right now. Or I'm not sure if we've provided the link in the chat, or it will certainly be provided in the follow-up to the webinar as well. The basics of the expression of interest. This is not a commitment at this point in time, but we are seeking that interest. Organizations will commit to our Movement Pro subscription or software as a service agreement for a period of 1 year. That's cancelable at any time. They will provide a reasonable list of completed infrastructure projects of interest that they'd like to see the impacts of. Due to the legacy of our data set currently, we recommend that those projects have been completed within the last 12 months, perhaps within the last 9 months, so sort of towards the mid to end of the summer last year. And that's simply because that will provide us the best positioning to analyze a before and an after data set between sort of earlier last year and this upcoming summer. We've noted 10, but I mean, we're 10 projects, per organization. We're open to discussions there. If you've got a more significant list, I mean, we'd be happy to include. We just want to make sure that there's equal opportunity and we keep any significant regional interest or bias out of the data set. You know, if there was one organization with 100 and everybody else only contributed 2 projects, that could skew things a little bit. So just an understanding of what we're looking for there. The type of data that we would be asking for would be simple characteristic information about your projects, such as capital costs, dates, construction opening, that sort of thing, the type of project itself. Generally, all of this data would be considered non-confidential and is likely already public information. In return, each organization will receive the full and complete Movement Pro module and product to use at their discretion, however you see fit, with all of its benefits and features, including tracking, as Jeff said, setting up customizable quad key collections. So basically tracking data anywhere within your area, as well as any NID sites you may have. And then what I mentioned before around leveraging ActiveExchange's Pro analytics service and our data science team, what we aim to do is build a sector level report with community impacts and return on investment metrics. That delivery is expected to be approximately 1 year after project initiation. At this point in time, targeting sort of Q1 of 2024 to ensure we get through the upcoming months here and are able to have that before and after picture that I mentioned previously. And then for each organization as well, along with that sector report, we'll receive a organization-specific appendix that details out the impacts, metrics, and other insights that we develop through the process on each of their submitted projects. So in going through that, you'll receive the general overall report, which will provide various insights, perhaps for future planning or future understanding of how these types of projects and their impacts can be measured and how success can be evaluated post-project, as well as an evaluation of some of your most recent projects in what we believe is a new and exciting way. And so again, I just confirm with Jeff that we'll and Diane that we'll provide that link in both the chat as well as in follow-up to this webinar. And with that, I'm happy to pass it back to Diane.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris and Jeff, for the excellent presentation. And I'll go back to my screen. There we go. So as mentioned, yes, we have the links which you'll receive following today's webinar that include where the database is. So cpra.activeexchange.ca. Once you have your account, that's where you can bookmark and go. Requesting an account, it's going to take about 5 business days currently to get an account set up, and accounts are set up under organizations so that you can eventually, as a municipality or an organization, manage your own membership, or who has access to your information and who doesn't. And as I mentioned before, there are some great tutorials done by Jeff and Chris, I think, that really help get more of the detail of how to do things in the system. So we're gonna go through the questions now, and I'm just opening up the questions, and I've left a few of them. You might be typing answers now, Chris, but I thought we could maybe address some of these. Donna's questions: Can municipalities upload custom geographies to be able to generate data specific to an organization? And I'll hand that over to the data experts.
Sure. Yeah, I was feverishly typing, but it's easier to talk. Yes, ActiveExchange does have the capability to include and upload custom mapping layers within our product. We actually do this for a number of clients. Generally, they're map layers that we created for various analytics purposes. It is an additional commercial service that we offer. So I just invite you to reach out to Jeff or myself, or the generic intelligence@activeexchange.ca email address. We're both Chris Chris at activeexchange.ca and Jeff at activeexchange.ca to learn more about that.
Right, thank you. And I think I just, okay. Can we access data? Chris has asked, can we access data on a more granular level? So specifically, I think, did you maybe address that in the Pro module? Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah, I think within the Pro module, actually one thing I think Jeff touched on it, but maybe didn't highlight is we have data differentiated by year, month, and the type of day. So weekdays versus weekends. It's also exportable. So we do offer that ability to extract that data on a quad key collection. So you set up a number of those squares together, you group them, and you say, this is what I want to collect on, or you relate that group to a site and say, again, this is what I wish to collect on. And there's an export button, and you can pull out the information that way.
Great, thank you. And Megan has asked about the types of activities that take place in community recreation facilities, and that there are many that aren't specifically recreation programs, and are those captured in the database? And I'll just say, yes, there's lots of opportunities to put things like childcare into the database to get a fuller picture of what a facility has. And there's also the opportunity to, I think you can add sort of, there's, I'm going to hand it over to Chris and because he's turned on his mic. You're going to say it way better.
No worries. Thank you. It's all good. I appreciate it. Absolutely. part of our commercial product line, and you again can go to activeexchange.ca to view that, is a product specifically for operators of these sports and recreation facilities and sites. We work with a number of organizations that have childcare within these sites and leverage that service. So just again, I think ask you to reach out to learn more about those other products and services.
Yeah, in the basic NID level, there's the opportunity to put those so ancillary services or co-located services as information. And I'll say the breadth of activity types is quite broad. We took it away. It's not just sports. There's a lot of more recreation based and very broad topics. So great. Chris is full of great questions and has asked, in future, will Statistics Canada be using the data in the infrastructure data collection at the core public infrastructure survey instead of their survey? We have discussed collaboration with Statistics Canada, and they were in on early discussions on this, but their plan is to continue with that survey as far as I know at this point. I know they've launched a new sort of interactive dashboard themselves of their collected data. And as I answered in a previous question, the information that is in there currently, the preloaded information, was from Statistics Canada, cleaned up, as well as other trusted sources. So Chris, or do you have anything you want to add to that question?
No, I think you covered it well. Thank you.
Yeah, we wish that we could be better aligned. And I think we are. We are certainly working with other partners like ParkSeek. If any of the municipalities on the call are working with ParkSeek, we are talking with them and trying to, maximize our data sharing as much as we can. And then Chris has asked also for the cost to participate in Movement Pro trial, and I think you covered that in the thing. Want to add?
Yeah, I just the commercial value was in there, but again, as part of this initiative and depending on the scale of interest that we receive, we're absolutely looking at figuring out what the best path forward with some group pricing is for that. So
right. Yeah, and
essentially why we didn't quote a price for anybody right
and
now.
Ray has asked if there'd be a possibility bundle for smaller municipalities that might not be able to to report it. Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Nicole has asked, how is the accuracy of the data ensured?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to exactly what direction you were thinking there, Nicole, when you asked that. Being an open source platform, for the most part, the data is effectively as good as the community is at maintaining it. That being said, we do have functionality, and I'm sure there'll be questions in here about bulk uploads and bulk editing and things like that, which are in our current pipeline for sort of very near future enhancements, I will say. We do have the ability in our database to actually, I'll say, lock a site down to specific organizations. Typically, those are either the owner and or the operator of that particular site. And at that point, then only users from those organizations, from those accounts, have the ability to edit the information within the NID itself.
Yeah, and there is an audit trail. Certainly on all changes that are made. So if something really goes awry, then there's a way to track it back. And certainly, you mentioned just briefly bulk ingestion. We know that this is a challenge for any municipality who has time to put their information in, and the idea of having a spreadsheet that you can use the column headings from your own asset management software and send that in. That's something that we're working on with ActiveExchange, and they're actively working on a solution for that. So,
And if I may just jump in here, I don't think what I'm about to say will directly answer that question, but I think it's important to know nonetheless is that for the movement data that is included in the platform, the data is guaranteed at a 95% confidence interval for individual indices that are tracked to be within the quad key that they are tracked in. So that is a 95% accuracy indicator for the movement data.
Derek has asked, it would be helpful to clearly define the data sets that were integrated into this. And I think you're talking about the community mapping layer where we had the pull up of the Statistics Canada data. If we use the data in our planning efforts, we need to be transparent on this. Absolutely. There are a little question mark where you can find out more about what the indices include. And Jeff, I'll hand you over to give some more information on that.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, Derek, that's a very good question and one that we absolutely encourage you all to know about what is behind the data. I guess what I will say for the time being, while there is nothing currently in the platform referencing such, is to reach out to either myself, Chris, or the Intelligence at Active Exchange email address, and we'll be happy to discuss our data sources with you then.
Yeah, I think we plan on having a little bit of a primer on that available, especially for planning consultants who might be using this as a tool in a master plan or feasibility study or anything related to that. Yeah. So
yeah, we've already received some of those questions and we're happy to answer them. So please reach out to us.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. This is definitely over to you guys. Suzanne has asked, is there capability to connect the geographic related data sets to legacy systems such as ArcGIS?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question, Suzanne. We leverage Active Exchange's platform leverages a mapping product delivered by Mapbox or through Mapbox, which is another GIS-based cloud service, essentially. So either through that, if you set up the links, we can help associate the links with the Mapbox directly. Again, because of the database, we want to, and this initiative with the CPRA, we want to ensure that the data security and that the data use stays within the parameters of this initiative. So again, it just be a separate conversation, but the capability is certainly there.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask the person who posted the question about privacy. Could you please maybe just add a comment about whether you're speaking about the movement data specifically or other data that might have been presented today? And I'm just going to then hopefully that person can provide. So there's two different answers to that question. And Maureen has asked, is condition information for facility infrastructure included? Yes, it is. That is included right on the site, that major the site information, facility information is included, as well as its construction date is, I think, Chris, is that correct? So that gives you also its life cycle. So yeah,
both site and facility have construction and I believe last refurbishment date, as well as a general condition entry right now. So I would say that the facility, again, for the data is in there. What we're really reaching out to this community as the users to make sure that those fields and those data pieces get leveraged.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Just going back to the data accuracy, Nicole's added a comment about human error, and absolutely in an open platform, that's for sure an issue. And the audit trail, maybe you can speak specifically about the audit trail and how that could be visible. Yeah.
Sure. I think I get that. I mean, as a software product working through our database, every action that is made by any user is tracked and logged. So, I mean, let's take this to the worst case scenario, because that's probably where a lot of people are going with. Open access means anybody can go in and delete my data or, do malicious things with it to make maybe their sites look better and my sites look worse, or whatever the case is. It should something like that happen, or data, changes unexpectedly and perhaps not in the way that you would like to see it with a site or facility that you ultimately own or operate, and should be the point source for or lead source for that site and facility. We can fully investigate any changes that were made. We'll be able to see what accounts changed them, which users changed them. We obviously have their email address and everything. And worst case scenario, if it comes to it, we can, well, not worst case, but we can certainly reverse changes, but we can also, obviously, if there was a problem, we can police the user base and restrict certain users from access or making changes or whatever, if it ever came to that. But the general intention with open source platforms is that everybody's motivated within that community to essentially put forward the best picture, because there is no other alternative for storing this type of information en masse and leveraging for initiatives like we're talked about, perhaps in the future when Statistics Canada sees the wealth of data that we have that isn't just municipal infrastructure but other infrastructure as well. It may be something that becomes even more valuable at that point in time. So I think we all as a community have incentive to push this the right direction, and I'd like to take it from a position that or a view that we're all here to do our best.
Thanks. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I'm just browsing through the questions. If we don't get to answer your question and you've put it either in the chat or in the Q&A box, we will be sending out written responses to these following, but I did want to touch on the one about privacy. So movement data is collected from sources where the user is providing that permission to use that data at the source. So whether it's Strava or whatever app you are using, that is it. All of that data is anonymized. So we don't know which person was where, we just know the number. And I think other data collected is I don't think there would be a privacy issue with other information for sure, unless.
Yeah, I would just touch on the movement data, because there are a number of different movement data type products in the market. We feel that this is probably the most private, the most privacy forward data set, and that we don't see device IDs, we don't see even actual counts of pings or anything like that. The data set comes as you will see it in the Movement Pro module. It's an indexed value, so it's a relative value based on a 95%, based on the 95% accuracy, but there's also an index against basically what's considered a max movement from the initial month of the data set, which was January 2021. So again, it can go over 1, it can be more than 100% of a reference index, but you don't actually have any indication of exact devices or anything like that.
I'll just add that GPS ping information is 100% anonymous. There is no personal information passed over through GPS ping, which is what we're tracking the data through. And if anyone does have any questions or need referencing for this data, we are happy to provide the privacy documentation.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to get to a few of the different questions before we have to sign off. So Sherry has asked about green spaces and not just open spaces like community gardening, as this becomes so popular. And yes, we've tried to be as inclusive as possible with the types of parks and open spaces that you can put and the kinds of activities that can take place in those. And I think gardening made it into the final list of activities, and yeah, for sure. And again, if there's things that you're like, hey, we really need to have this is just a huge activity, and or it doesn't quite fit, we're taking feedback. Certainly small modifications are always possible.
Yeah, I'd just add we're continuing to look at and do plan to review our data schema for space definition. So that's around the facilities, and we want to be generic in a way and as standardized as possible so that it allows for comparisons across across different provinces, different communities, that sort of thing. However, certainly if there's something that you feel is absolutely missing, please reach out and we can either provide advice on how best to structure it within the existing data, or certainly add it to our list of enhancements.
Great. We're losing a couple of people, as I know we've run just a couple of minutes over our time. Chris has a very specific question. Chris will write the answer to that one down because I want to get to Anthony's question. And specifically, I'm not sure where you're from, Anthony, but you noticed that not very many of your municipalities' facilities were uploaded from the Statistics Canada, and it appears to be mostly privates. Yes, I'll let Chris or Jeff address some of the challenges that were faced with the Statistics Canada data that you may, or that your municipality may have provided in the Stats Canada survey. And I'll just let you guys speak to that point specifically.
Sure. Yeah. So what you see in the database currently was largely based off of I forget exactly what the name of the Stats Canada data set is, but
the Core Public Infrastructure Survey, I think that's what it's called.
Well, there's a data set specifically to recreation facilities, I believe it is. That data set has well over 160,000 entries. And a few things come out of that when we remove just the trails and I think casinos and gambling facilities or something like that. That number drops down to roughly 40,000, but it is actually tracking at what we would consider a facility level. So a school gymnasium and a school playground out back or whatever in the yard actually end up as two separate entries on there. So that data set, when you combine it into our schema, first reduces quite considerably. The second answer there is the data set is incomplete. There are many facilities within that data set that don't have associated address information sufficient for us to validate that facility actually exists presently today. And part of our process is certainly to validate that those facilities exist and aren't previously closed or anything like that in order to get them into the database. So we continue to work with that data set. We continue to refine that. Our entries through there, and we aren't relying just on the community here to add their sites and facilities. Like I said, some bulk ingestion tools are coming, and we do have a backlog of sites and facilities as well that we're working through there.
Great, thank you. Well, we've just gone 4 minutes over time. There's only 2 questions left on my list, but as I said, we'll go through them all. Audrey has asked, does the information reflect deterioration or life cycle? And I think we did touch on that we've got a facility condition and then the year, so that you can certainly look at the current state of it, and that might be something that you want to include in your action plans as well. You may have the ability to put some of that information in, and that's specific to your organization. And then, so I'm going to let you answer Chris's question about the difference between rink and arena area.
Sure. Yeah, I was just typing that quick one, but that's one of the highlights that we're working to adjust or enhance our space definitions. So for the time being, I would recommend that basically if you're speaking to like a typical hockey ice pad of some sort, define it as a rink, or if you're curling, define it as a rink. And then just associate a appropriate usage with it. We actually, essentially what we'll be doing there is splitting out area from arena, because area is just meant to be like a general area, so a catch-all, if you will. And an arena can be anything, including stadiums and other things that don't service a hockey facility at all. or an ice pad at all. So that's kind of the intent there.
Perfect. Well, I think we will wrap it up there, and I'm just going to invite Martin to come back and share some final thoughts with us. I can't hear you, Martin. We've lost your microphone.
Sorry, how about that? Are we better?
There we go.
Yeah,
Perfect.
excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. So a big thank you to everyone who presented today and to everybody who was on the call. I just want to echo something that Chris and Jeff said, which is that this is of the community, for the community, by the community. It's going to really take a collective effort. We want to make this as useful a tool as possible, and the way to do that is to make sure that we have as much data as possible. So we see you as partners, not just as users. We invite your feedback, and we really want to encourage you to share this with your colleagues across the sector, and let's get the data up. We are at CPRA are available to you. If you have questions, concerns, suggestions, we want to hear from you. And thank you so much for giving us an hour or a little more of your time. And we'll leave it at that, I think, Diane.
Thank you very much to everyone who attended and hung on to the very end. And as noted, we will get a copy of the link to the recording, and we encourage everybody to join the discussion group on the bench, which will be specific to this database. It's where you can ask questions and hopefully get your answers really quickly. So thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, all.